had a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they sent up some kids to say how much they loved their Russian Studies class. And one of the senators asked a girl, can't you learn these things in other courses? And she said, no, before I took this class, I didn't realize that I was oppressed. Now that I took the class, I realize I'm oppressed. So we got the bill passed. The bill, it takes effect December 31st. John Hubenthal will be the new superintendent of schools, will have the power to cut off 10% of their funds if they don't stop. If I'm Attorney General, will give him the legal help he needs because they have a right to appeal to an administrative hearing officer. It'll be a tough legal fight, but I would be determined to give whatever resources are necessary to win that fight so that our schools teach kids to treat each other as individuals and to be proud Americans. So those are a few thoughts, and I've come, I love coming to Flagstaff. My youngest son was a lumberjack, and being the youngest of four, he was the one that was never academic, but now he's a lawyer, so they did a good job with him.
Or says something about lawyers.
Yeah, I would tell you guys a lawyer joke, but I think I probably did that last time I was here today. So I would be very grateful for whatever help you give me, especially financial help would be very much appreciated. And I'd love to answer your questions, or as John McCain says, questions, comments, or insults.
There's Horne, I have a couple of questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. He was looking at that. That's all right. I have a couple of questions. How do you stand on gun control?
I'm endorsed by the NRA. When I was in the legislature, I voted for all the things to, stop cities from trying to control guns and so on.
I could remember you had the NRA endorsement. But one more question that I'm asking, I guess. Here in Arizona, do illegal immigrants still get, they have access to welfare, medical, all the state welfare programs? Do they have access to
Not welfare, but if they have like anybody else, if they have a medical emergency, obviously a hospital can't let someone bleed to death on their floor.
The ICE doesn't seem, it seems like the federal government is going to...
Could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, it seems like now the federal government is not going to cooperate with local law enforcement in the enforcement of 1070. How are you going to work with ICE as far as turning over illegal?
Well, it's interesting because Judge Bolton's decision, which held part of the 1070 unconstitutional, one of the things she said was that the law requires that if you arrest someone and you have reasonable suspicion that he's illegal, you need to consult with ICE. And she said, well, that puts an extra burden on the federal government because they're going to get more reports. So the idea being that the federal government has a right to not do its job. I don't think that's true. I think the federal government needs to do its job. So we can get that turned around on 1070. I think that will help. Ultimately, we're going to have to replace Obama in 2012. But I think the state can do a lot, and certainly apply political pressure in a situation where the people agree with us, I think can be effective.
And the second question would you be in favor of not issuing a birth certificate, just an affidavit of live birth to anchor babies?
Yeah, that's a very interesting issue, and let me tell you the legal history of that. The 14th Amendment was passed in 1867 to give citizenship to the freed slaves. And the 14th Amendment says those persons born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction are citizens. The senator who introduced that provision said that this would not apply to children of diplomats or aliens because they're also subject to a foreign jurisdiction. They're not subject to our exclusive jurisdiction. In the very first United States Supreme Court to interpret the 14th Amendment was in 1875, and it was called the Slaughterhouse cases. It involved some slaughterhouses in Louisiana. And in that case, the Supreme Court repeated what the senator had said, that this does not apply to children of diplomats or aliens. In the 1890s, the Supreme Court reversed itself, dealing with a child of a Chinese immigrant who himself could not become a citizen because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. The court said this 14th Amendment doesn't apply to children of diplomats, but it does apply to children of aliens. Now, they weren't dealing with illegal aliens because the United States didn't try to regulate immigration until 1921. So if you had to argue this case to the Supreme Court, I would say you wouldn't have to say that you're asking them to change something. We would just say you were right the first time.
So all those people that have been given birth certificates as anchor babies are really not citizens?
No, they are citizens because any change would have to be prospective. You can't take citizenship away from people who have it. So
Even though it's misinterpreting the law?
Well, the Supreme Court is the final say, and their last decision is that they are citizens. So we have to get the Supreme Court to say, you know, we were right the first time, but it would only be prospective.
The role of AG, I have been impressed with Paul Gosar using terms like we're going to earn back our state, not take it back. We want to control the border, not close the border. You know, the type of media control, I guess, on what our message really is. We're all frustrated, I'm sure, with the way media handles just anything, whether it's either way. But your role, can you, how much can you do to help the message be what it really is versus, you know, I mean, they would call you an anti-immigration person, which you're not.
Anti-illegal immigration.
I know that, but they always drop the key words.
But they can't call me anti-immigration. I happen to be an immigrant. I was born in Canada and got my citizenship. We came to this country when I was 4. So when I tell people I'm from Montreal, they expect me to know French, which I don't. But I became a citizen because when my parents became citizens as a minor. So they can't call me anti-immigrant, but we're anti-illegal immigration.
Sure. But what, I mean, can you help with that message?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there are a lot of interesting studies done. There's a fellow, I can't remember his name, but he writes for the Wall Street Journal. He's always talking about being careful of the words that you use.
I thought I would mention again, since there's more people here now, our Republican Women in Flagstaff is having a luncheon on Thursday, and our speaker is Ward Connerly. He's going to be talking about preferences. So I just thought.
Yes, well, this is the proposition that I'm most passionately in favor of. In the summer of 1963, I just graduated from high school, and I attended the March on Washington, in which Martin Luther King said we should be judged by the quality of our character, not the color of our skin. And that has been my fundamental principle my whole life. And when Lyndon Johnson started the reverse discrimination already in 1964, I was against it even then. I said, this is illogical. We stand for the idea that we're individuals. So you hear a lot of politicians say, well, maybe affirmative action served its purpose, but it's no longer needed. Not me. I was against it from day one. And when I was elected to the legislature in 1996, the very first thing I did was introduce a referendum patterned after the California Civil Rights, like one that's up for a vote now. I could have gotten it passed in the House. I had 21 sponsors, and I could have gotten the 31 votes. But Scott Bungard, some of you may remember, was carrying it in the Senate, and he couldn't get the 16 votes in the Senate, so it didn't get through. But I worked with, Ward Connerly came to Arizona, and I worked with him. I met with the editorial board with him, and so on. And I remember one time I was at a committee hearing, and I got a note that said that Ward Connerly called. So I thought, oh, there must be something important on this referendum. So I left the committee meeting and called him right away. Turned out he was lobbying me on a bill dealing with regulation of plumbers because he's in the construction business. Sorry, I forgot to turn this off. Ward Connerly is one of my heroes.
Yeah.
And I wrote one of the pro statements in the booklet. If you look at the booklet for the pro statements for 107, I wrote one of those. Cost me $75, but it was money well spent. So I'm very passionate on that issue.
I have a question about Flagstaff. Flagstaff City Council voted to become a sanctuary city. What would you do as a Attorney General to nail it?
Well, the part of 1070 that forbids sanctuary cities was not held unconstitutional, so that can be enforced right now. And you wouldn't need me to do it, any of you can sue them. There's a provision for a citizen lawsuit.
In 1070?
In 1070, and that part was not held unconstitutional by Judge by the judge.
Should we spend our money on that or your campaign?
My campaign.
No, I mean,
Yeah, right.
I'm looking at this more after the.
Right.
second.
Yeah, I